The plumber called at 9:12 in the morning. I was in the backyard with my coffee, watching the neighbor's dog dig under the fence again when my phone buzzed on the porch railing. I didn't recognize the number at first. Then I remembered I'd hired him 2 days ago to fix a slow drain in my late son's bathroom. I almost didn't answer. Then the second buzz came, a text. Please pick up. I found something. Don't want to say on the phone. My name's Albert. I'm 64 years old. I live alone in a 4-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio that's too big for one person and too full of memories to sell. My son Nathan died 18 months ago. Heart attack at 38. No warning, no history, nothing. He was at the gym on a Tuesday morning and then he wasn't anywhere anymore. He'd been living with me the last 3 years of his life, ever since his divorce. We were closer than most fathers and sons, I think. Or maybe I just tell myself that now because I can't stand the alternative. I've been putting off fixing the drain since he died. Kept telling myself I'd get to it. Kept not getting to it. I called the plumber back. Mr. Albert. His voice was low, careful. You need to come up here. To the bathroom. I don't know how to say this. Just please come. And come alone if anyone else is home. I'm alone. Always alone now. I set down my coffee and went inside. His name was Ray, the plumber. 40-something. Stocky, a man who looked like he'd seen the inside of 100 houses and nothing surprised him anymore. He was standing in the doorway of Nathan's bathroom, not going in, just standing there with his hands at his sides. I had to pull the access panel, he said. Behind the tub, to get to the drain connection. And I found there's a space back there. Someone built it out deliberately. I looked past him into the bathroom. The panel beside the tub was open, a square about 18 inches across. Ray stepped aside and I crouched down and looked in. The space behind the wall was narrow, maybe a foot and a half deep, running the length of the tub. Someone had lined the bottom with a piece of plywood. On the plywood sat a fireproof document box, the kind you buy at Staples for about $40, a sealed envelope, and a hard drive in a padded case. Nathan's handwriting was on the envelope. Dad, it said. Just that. I don't know how long I crouched there staring at it. Ray put his hand on my shoulder at some point and said he could wait outside. Give me time. I told him what I told myself 100 times since Nathan died. I'm fine. I can handle this. I wasn't fine. I wasn't handling anything. I reached in and took out the envelope. Dad, if you're reading this, something happened to me, and it wasn't an accident. I know how that sounds. I know you're going to want to call someone, tell someone, show someone, show someone. Please don't. Not yet. Read everything first. Then you'll understand why. I've been working on something for almost 2 years. I didn't tell you because I knew you worry and because I needed to keep you safe, you and everyone else I love. By the time you find this, either I got out clean and came back to destroy it myself, or I didn't make it, and you need to know the truth. The truth is that Martin Kowalski had me killed. I sat on the bathroom floor and read for a very long time. Let me tell you who Martin Kowalski was. He was the CEO of a regional insurance company called Heartland Coverage Group, based in Cincinnati, about an hour from Dayton. Mid-size operation, maybe 600 employees, the kind of company most people in Ohio had heard of in passing. A billboard on the highway, an ad during the evening news, the kind of company that seemed solid, trustworthy, unremarkable. Nathan had worked there as a senior claims analyst for 7 years. A claims analyst reviews insurance claims and decides whether they get paid. You file a claim for a surgery or a hospital stay or a procedure your doctor says you need, and somebody like Nathan looks at the file and determines whether the policy covers it. It sounds dry. It sounds administrative. What Nathan found was anything but. His letter ran to 9 pages, handwritten on lined notebook paper in that cramped, leftward-leaning script I'd watched him develop since the 3rd grade. I'm going to try to tell it the way he told me, because he was clearer about it than I could ever be. In 2021, Nathan started noticing that certain claims were being denied in patterns that didn't match the policy language. Expensive claims, major surgeries, cancer treatments, long-term care, being rejected for reasons that Nathan believed were either technically wrong or deliberately misleading. Reasons like pre-existing condition applied to diagnoses that clearly weren't pre-existing. Reasons like not medically necessary attached to procedures that had been explicitly recommended by treating physicians. At first, he thought it was department policy being applied inconsistently. Raised it with his supervisor. His supervisor told him to trust the system. He kept watching. In the spring of 2022, a claim crossed his desk that he couldn't let go. A 54-year-old woman in Findlay, Ohio. He referred to her in the letter only as Mrs. Myas, H, to protect her privacy, had been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Her oncologist had recommended a specific immunotherapy drug. The claim was denied. Experimental treatment, not covered under current policy guidelines. Nathan checked the policy. He checked the FDA approval status of the drug. He checked Heartland's own internal treatment guidelines. The denial was wrong. The drug was approved. The treatment was covered. He escalated it internally. The denial stood. Mrs. H couldn't afford the treatment out of pocket. She died 11 months later. Nathan wrote, "That was when I stopped thinking this was incompetence. Incompetence doesn't follow a pattern. Incompetence doesn't make the company money every single time." He spent the next 18 months building a case. He kept a separate personal laptop, the one in the document box, that never connected to Heartland's network. He saved copies of claims, denial letters, policy documents, internal communications. He created a spreadsheet tracking every major denial he could access, cross-referenced against policy language, against patient outcomes when he could find them through public records, against the financial impact on the company. He identified 23 cases where he believed the denials were fraudulent. Not mistakes, not gray areas, but deliberate misrepresentations designed to avoid paying legitimate claims. The money involved was significant. He estimated Heartland had avoided paying out somewhere between $4 and $6 million in claims over 3 years through this pattern. The money flowed directly to executive bonuses and shareholder returns. Kowalski had taken home $2.3 million the year the denials peaked. Nathan had tried to report it. That part of his letter was hard to read. He'd contacted the Ohio Department of Insurance through their anonymous tip line in early 2023. Nothing happened. He waited 4 months and filed again with more documentation. An investigator called him once, asked a few questions, and then went quiet. Nathan did some digging and found that the investigator's brother-in-law was a former Heartland board member. He didn't know if that meant anything. He was afraid it did. He reached out to a journalist at the Cincinnati Enquirer who covered business and insurance. The journalist was interested, asked for documents, and then 3 weeks later sent a brief email saying she couldn't pursue the story at this time. Nathan never found out why she stopped. In October of 2023, his car was broken into in the Heartland parking garage. Nothing was stolen. His laptop bag was unzipped, and his work laptop was on. The personal laptop was open. He'd had the personal laptop at home. He started keeping it in the hidden space that same week. "I built the space myself," he wrote. "Watched videos online. Took me 2 weekends. You always said I was bad with my hands, Dad. Turns out I just needed the right motivation. I had to stop reading at that line. Had to stop the letter down and sit with it for a minute." He wrote, "In January of 2024, Kowalski called me into his office. Just the two of us. He told me he was aware that I'd been flagging certain claims internally, and that he appreciated my diligence, but that I needed to trust the legal and compliance team to make final determinations. He was very calm, very friendly. Then he said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since. He said, 'Nathan, a man your age, living alone, no safety net. You want to be careful. The world is unpredictable. People slip. Hearts give out.'" He smiled when he said it, like it was a joke. It wasn't a joke. Nathan had been dead 4 months when I read that. The letter told me where to go, not the state insurance commission, not the local police. He'd already tried those. He'd written the name of a federal contact, an investigator with the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, the federal agency that handles insurance fraud cases involving patient harm. Her name was Agent Patricia Huang, out of the Cleveland Regional Office. Nathan had found her through a healthcare fraud advocacy organization and reached out anonymously 6 months before he died. She had responded. They'd been in contact for 2 months before his heart attack. Or what everyone had told me was a heart attack. The box held the laptop, the USB drive with a red label that said "Evidence. Do not open without consent." in a folder of printed documents organized with color-coded tabs the way Nathan had organized everything since he was in middle school and decided the color-coded binders were the secret to a good life. Ray was still in the house. I could hear him downstairs moving quietly, trying to give me space. I went down and found him sitting at the kitchen table, not looking at his phone, just sitting. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I need to ask you a favor. I need you to forget what you found." I know that's a strange thing to ask. I know it puts you in an awkward position, but I need a few days before this becomes anyone else's business. He looked at me for a long moment. He was a careful man, I could see that. The kind of man who didn't speak until he knew what he wanted to say. "I came to fix a drain," he said finally. "The drain's fixed. I never needed to open that panel at all. Could have reached the connection from the access point in the hallway closet." A pause. "I think I made a mistake opening the wrong panel. Happens sometimes." I shook his hand and paid him in cash. He left without another word. I need to tell you about Nathan before I tell you the rest. He was 38 when he died. He played soccer in high school, coached a youth league in his 30s because he said he missed the game more than he expected to. He had a daughter from his marriage, a girl named Becca, who was 9 years old and lived in Columbus with their mother. He drove to Columbus every other weekend without fail, no matter the weather, no matter how tired he was. He brought her to visit me 6, 7 times a year. We'd take her to the Dayton Air Force Museum, which she claimed to love, but I suspected she only said because she knew I loved it. She would stand in front of the planes with this patient, indulgent expression that she must have gotten from her mother because Nathan never had a patient bone in his body. He made terrible coffee but refused to admit it. We argued about it every Sunday morning for 3 years. I'd go out to buy good coffee from the shop on Brown Street, and he'd have a pot already made when I got back. And he'd say, "It's fine, Dad. It's completely fine." And it never was. I miss arguing about coffee more than I can explain. I called the number Nathan had left for Agent Kwong the morning after I found the letter. I told her who I was. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Nathan talked about you," she said quietly. "He was very proud of you." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. "Mr. Albert," she said, "I've been trying to understand what happened to your son for 4 months. I had no idea he'd left documentation. This changes everything. Can you bring what you have to Cleveland?" I drove up the next morning. I sat across a conference table from Agent Huang and two of her colleagues, and I opened Nathan's box and watched them go very still as they looked at what was inside. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Juan told me later that the documentation Nathan had gathered was unusually thorough, the kind of evidence that takes investigative teams months to compile independently. Cross-reference claims, the denial patterns, the financial records he'd somehow obtained, the copies of internal emails that I still don't entirely understand how we got. She wouldn't tell me how we got them. I didn't push. They subpoenaed Heartland's records in March. In April, they brought in forensic accountants. In May, they arrested Kowalski at his home in Indian Hill, one of those old money Cincinnati neighborhoods with the long driveways and the stone gates, on charges of insurance fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. His CFO was arrested the same morning. Two members of the Ohio Department of Insurance who had received payments routed through a consulting firm were arrested 6 weeks later. The charge that mattered most to me came in June, after the forensic accountants finished with Heartland's financial records, and after investigators with the Hamilton County Medical Examiner's Office re-examined Nathan's case. The Ohio Attorney General added a charge of aggravated murder against Kowalski. The evidence was a purchase order, routed through 3 shell companies but ultimately traceable, for a drug that, introduced in sufficient quantities over several weeks, can induce cardiac events that are nearly indistinguishable from natural causes. The drug had been found in trace amounts in Nathan's preserved autopsy samples, missed the first time because no one had known to look for it. Someone had been putting it in the coffee creamer in the Heartland break room. In the container Nathan used, the one nobody else touched because everybody knew Nathan was the only person in the department who took his coffee with cream. I've spent a lot of time since then thinking about Sunday mornings, about the terrible coffee, about the fact that something ordinary and harmless and annoying, the kind of domestic friction that makes up most of a life, was also the thing that saved his documentation and failed to save him. The trial began in September of last year. I attended every day. I sat where Kowalski could see me. And I want to be honest with you, I did it deliberately. I wanted him to know that someone was there, that Nathan wasn't just a line item. They played recordings during the trial. The healthcare fraud advocacy organization Nathan had worked with had helped him document 2 phone calls with Kowalski from late 2023, legally recorded under Ohio's one-party consent law. In one of them, Kowalski said, his voice smooth and reasonable, in that way that certain powerful men have perfected, "Nathan, I've always believed in addressing concerns at the appropriate level. You're a valuable member of this team. I'd hate to see that change." And Nathan's voice, steady, slightly formal the way he got when he was holding something in. "I understand, Mr. Kowalski. I just want to make sure we're doing right by the policyholders." The whole courtroom was quiet. My son, 36 years old in that recording, sitting across a desk from a man who had already decided to have him killed, keeping his voice steady, doing right by the policyholders. The jury was out for 8 hours, guilty on all counts, including the murder charge. When the verdicts came in, Kowalski turned around and looked at the gallery. I don't know what he was looking for. He found me. I held up Nathan's letter so he could see it. The letter that began, "Dad, if you're reading this." He looked at it for a moment and then looked away. Afterward was complicated. It's always complicated. Heartland Coverage Group is placed on the federal receivership. Thousands of policyholders had their cases reviewed by a court-appointed administrator. Roughly 340 claims that had been fraudulently denied were reopened. Some of the people affected were still alive and received settlements. Some weren't. For the families in that second group, there was money, and there was a verdict, and there was still a person missing from every table. The 2 state insurance officials who'd been paid off received prison sentences. The journalist who killed Nathan's story. It came out to her in discovery that she'd been approached by a public relations firm working for Heartland and offered a consulting contract worth $80,000. She lost her job. I don't know what else happened to her. Agent Huang called me when the sentencing was finalized. Kowalski got life without parole, plus consecutive sentences on the federal charges. "Your son built one of the most complete fraud cases I've seen in 20 years, she told me. "He did everything right. He just ran out of time." I think about that a lot. He did everything right. Becca was 10 when her father died, 11 when I had to explain to her that it wasn't the way we'd thought. Her mother and I sat with her at the kitchen table, and I told her what I could in words that a child could carry without being crushed by them. "Your dad found out that someone was doing something very wrong, and he tried to stop it. That's why he's gone." She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Did he know it was dangerous?" I thought about the hidden compartment, about 9 pages of handwritten notes, about a man who built something in secret over 2 weekends because he decided some things were worth protecting, even if he couldn't protect himself. "Yes," I said. "He knew, but he kept going anyway." "Yes, baby. He kept going anyway." She nodded slowly, the way her father used to nod when he made up his mind about something. Then he was brave. I am 64 years old. I still live in the house in Dayton. I go into Nathan's room sometimes, not to leave it unchanged the way I left it after he first died, but to sit in it. His soccer cleats are in the closet. His coffee mug is on the desk. The one that says "World's Most Average Dad," which Becca gave him as a joke the Father's Day before he died, and which he displayed unironically because he thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever done. I've kept most of what was in the hidden space. The FBI has the originals, archived permanently, but Huang had copies made for me before the trial. The spreadsheet Nathan built, 3 years of work in color-coded rows. The printed timeline he constructed connecting the denials to the financial records to the executive compensation. His notes in the margins checked this: strong, not enough alone, but strong with the others. I sealed the space back up after the trial. Had a contractor come in, close the panel, repaint the wall. It's just a bathroom now. But sometimes I put my hand on that wall. I want to say something to you directly. Whoever you are, watching this at whatever hour you found yourself watching it. My son kept a secret because he was trying to protect me. I understand that. In some ways, I've made peace with it. But I also know that if he'd told me, If he'd sat down at the kitchen table one Sunday morning over his terrible coffee and said, "Dad, I found something and I'm scared and I don't know what to do," I would have been there. I don't know if it would have been there. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome. Maybe it wouldn't have. Maybe Kowalski would have moved faster. Maybe it ends the same way regardless. But Nathan would have known in those last months that he wasn't alone in it. That matters. That matters more than I can explain. If you're carrying something right now, something that feels too dangerous or too complicated or too heavy to put on the people you love, I'm asking you to reconsider. Not because sharing it will necessarily save you, but because the people who love you want to stand next to you in the hard things. They want the chance. Give them the chance. Be them, the probable, Beagle. Comes to visit every month now. We go to the Air Force Museum and she stands in front of the planes with that patient expression. And I've started to think maybe she actually does love it. Or maybe she loves it because it was his, because it was ours, because some things become valuable by association and stay that way. We stop at Nathan's grave on the way home. It's in a quiet cemetery on the west side of Dayton, under an oak tree that's older than any of us. The headstone reads, Nathan James Mercer, 1986-2024. He did everything right. That last line was Becca's idea. I bring the letter every time, the one that started everything. I fold it back into the envelope the way I found it, carry it in my jacket pocket, take it out and hold it at the graveside. I don't read it anymore. I have it memorized by now, every word, every sentence, the way the ink got heavier when he was pressing down harder, the places where he paused mid-sentence and started again. Dad, if you're reading this, something happened to me, and it wasn't an accident. I know, son, I know. We got him. The bathroom drain still works fine. Rated good work. The light in there is steady and bright, and everything is exactly as it should be, except for the one thing that can never be exactly as it should be again. I walk out to the car. Becca is already buckled in, holding the flowers, yellow tulips, the ones Nathan always brought when he was trying to apologize for something, which became a joke between them, which means that now they mean something else entirely. I check my pocket for the letter. The drive to the cemetery is about 20 minutes. We take the long way, past the soccer fields where he used to coach. The kids are out there this morning, small figures in bright jerseys, chasing each other across the grass. Becca watches them out the window without saying anything. He was a good coach, she says finally. The kids really liked him. He was, I say. They did. She's quiet for another mile. I'm going to be a lawyer, she says. I decided. I don't say anything for a moment, just drive. Your dad would have loved that, I say. She nods, looks back out the window. The fields slide past. The sun is out. It's a good morning in Dayton, Ohio, which is a thing I try to let myself notice. Nathan would have wanted me to notice. We got him, son. Rest easy. I've had a lot of time to think about cause and effect, not in any abstract way. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a 64-year-old man from Dayton who drinks too much coffee and goes to the cemetery on Sunday mornings. But when I look at what happened, really look at it, I keep arriving at the same place. Every single thing that unfolded came directly from a choice someone made. Nathan chose to keep watching when his supervisor told him to stop. Kowalski chose to protect his money instead of the people his company had made promises to. Mrs. H filed a claim and trusted that the system would do what it said it would do. A plumber chose to open the wrong access panel and then chose not to pretend he hadn't. Every one of those choices had a consequence that nobody could have fully predicted. That's what I think people get wrong about cause and effect. They imagine it as a clean line. This caused that. That caused this. It's not a line. It's a web. And you are always contributing to it, whether you intend to or not. What Nathan did took a particular kind of intelligence that I don't think gets talked about enough. Not book intelligence, he was smart, but that's not what I mean. I mean the intelligence to look at something that everyone around him was treating as normal and say, this isn't right, and I can prove it. Most people, when they feel that friction between what they're told and what they can see, find a way to smooth it over. It's easier. It costs less. Nathan couldn't do that. I don't think he was built for it. He was the kid who told his third grade teacher that the math problem on the board had a typo in it, and he was correct, and he was not particularly apologetic about it. That quality, the inability to accept a wrong answer just because someone with authority handed it to you, is what built that spreadsheet, is what built that hidden room, is what ultimately put Kowalski in prison, and the courage. I want to be careful here because I think people throw that word around too easily. What Nathan had wasn't the absence of fear. He was scared, and the letter makes that clear. The recorded calls make that clear. The recorded calls make that clear. The fact that he built a fireproof hiding place behind his bathtub makes that very clear. What he had was the decision to keep going anyway. To say, I am frightened, and I'm going to do this thing regardless. That's not the absence of fear. That's something much harder than that. Kowalski made choices too. He chose repeatedly over years to treat human suffering as a budget line. And every choice he made, thinking he was protecting himself, actually built the case against him, brick by brick, because Nathan was watching and writing everything down. The things we do when we think no one is paying attention, those things have a way of compounding. The truth has a strange persistence. You can delay it, you can suppress it, buy it off, scare it into silence, but it tends to find a crack eventually. In Nathan's case, the crack was a drain that had been slow for 18 months and a plumber who opened the wrong panel. I think about what I want to pass on to Becca. Not as a lesson, not as a speech. She'd roll her eyes and she'd be right to. Just as the thing I hope she absorbs from watching her father's life and the way it ended and the way it mattered. It would be this: pay attention to what's in front of you. Do the work honestly. Don't let fear make your decisions. And if you're carrying something heavy, let someone stand next to you. We were built for that. All of us. We were built to carry things together.